In the 1990s, a man named Preston Nichols went public and started saying the strangest things. He said he'd been involved with a series of military projects, and after uncovering repressed memories, he said he now remembered working on things such as mind control, teleportation, telepathy, and even time travel. This was all top secret, of course. The experiments, he said, had taken place at a U.S. military black site in a place called Montauk in New York State. Other people have also come out and said the U.S. government has conducted similar experiments that sound like science fiction. But just how credible are these people, and how does this tie into Stranger Things? Before we get back to Mr. Nichols, we first want to tell you about something called the Philadelphia experiment. You see, Nichols said that the experiments that he took part in were kind of a follow-on from this alleged experiment. We've done a full show on this, so we'll just give you a recap now. As the story goes, while the USA was fighting in World War II, it was developing a ship, but this was no ordinary ship. Called the USS Eldridge, the destroyer was by some accounts out of this world in many respects. It's said in 1943 an experiment took place and the ship just disappeared from the eyes of those who stood by. This was apparently teleportation, and the technology was created by Nikola Tesla. One man said the ship was surrounded by a blue light and then poof, it was gone. But that's not a bad thing to have in a war. How do we know any of this? Well, the man who claimed to be a whistleblower told a writer, and the writer relayed the tale. It was even written that when the ship re-emerged, things hadn't gone so well, as the men were mangled on the ship. Some of them actually fused to the thing. Conspiracy theorists have written that some of those men ended up in mental asylums while others died. The problem is, can we believe this happened on the account of one man, a man who would change his story over his lifetime? Well, now we must talk about another man, and his name was Al Bielek. He claimed that after watching the movie The Philadelphia Experiment, once repressed memories came back to him, and he too now realized that he had worked on these secret projects and he had also seen a ship teleport. He went further though, saying that after the experiment he became part of the Montauk Project. He claimed that the USA was working on time travel, and indeed, he had been sent to the future himself. He claims to have been on board one ship, and after it disappeared, he awoke in a hospital covered in radiation burns in the year 2137. But that wasn't all. He also said he visited the 28th century and gone as far forward on one journey as 6037. The question again is, do we believe the words of this one man? It's not as if he's ever come forward with any kind of substantial proof. We just have to take his word for it. We should mention a man named Jacques FLE. He wrote a piece called Anatomy of a Hoax, the Philadelphia Experiment 50 years later, in an attempt to better understand why some people were saying such things had happened. His conclusion in some part was that indeed the USA was trying to develop technologies that would make ships difficult to be hit by magnetic weapons, but there was nothing otherworldly about it. The technology wasn't that great at all. He said perhaps this might have planted seeds in people's minds, and that's why folks started talking about disappearing ships. After the war, say conspiracy theorists, the USA started doing things in tune with the TV show Stranger Things. We should say that the original title of the series was actually Montauk, but the Duffer Brothers changed their minds on that one. One of those things was seeking out children with psychic sensitivities and basically taking them from the streets and conducting experiments on them. Now, this is not so over the top because the CIA had a mind control program that definitely did exist, and it was called MK Ultra. The CIA wanted to try to figure out how to control someone's mind, and to do this, they did things such as give people the powerful drug LSD. They also tried hypnosis, sleep deprivation, isolation, and forms of torture. It was secret and, as it turned out, very unethical. This is a far cry from experimenting on children who might have the power of telekinesis though. That's being able to move things with your mind, such as Eleven can do in Stranger Things. It's also very different from telepathy, being able to read someone's mind. There's no evidence that either is possible, but it makes interesting TV. The men who had talked about such things, Bielek and Nichols, both say, like Eleven, young children were strapped into chairs where they would have their psychic abilities tested. This chair in the project was called the Montauk Chair. It gets stranger though, because in the 1940s a man called Jose Silva did create something called Silva Mind Control. This was supposed to better a child's IQ score, but Silva also thought that it might bring out a child's psychic abilities. This man and his tests did exist. One man named Duncan Cameron claims to have taken part in one of those tests, but then said he was recruited by Men in Black. Cameron claims to have experienced psychic abilities first as a 12-year-old, and later he was made part of the MK Ultra program. He said he was abducted and forced to take part in the Montauk Project, and in that Montauk Chair some crazy things happened. We've seen him on YouTube talking about his mind-bending experiences. We should say now that Bielek claims that when his memories came back to him, he remembered that his real name was Ed Cameron, and he was in fact the brother of Duncan Cameron. In one interview, Duncan Cameron said, "I was involved in a number of research projects back in the 70s and 80s that actually created a fixed time loop back to the 40s. He was apparently traumatized by this, as any kid would be, and it took some time to adjust back to normal life." He said he was abducted in total 13 times, groomed by the military to do exactly what they asked of him. On his website, it's written about his time in the chair, saying things such as this: "His focused awareness became one with the greater field of consciousness, and his awareness became one with his surroundings. The linear sequence of time changed, space unfolded, and events happened synchronously." This is what Nichols wrote about this talented child. The first experiment was called the seeing eye. With a lock of a person's hair or other appropriate object in his hand, Duncan could concentrate on the person and be able to see as if he were seeing through their eyes, hearing through their ears, and feeling through their body. He could actually see through other people anywhere on the planet. You can watch interviews with both Nichols and Cameron, and the two discuss these secret projects, talking about the teleporting ships under the Rainbow Project, aka the Philadelphia Project. They also talk about the Phoenix Project, which was essentially a mind control program which also started in World War II. If you read the comments below on one video on YouTube, you'll find many people believe them, and some people claim to know others that were part of these projects. Here's an example comment: "These experiments are still going on in sub-basements beneath the east end of Long Island, and I intend to prove it. These experiments never stopped. They just hid them beneath the ground. Long Island is a test lab for the shadow government's projects." In one of his books, Nichols went so far as to say that during one experiment on the young Cameron, a kind of monster was created by his subconscious, and that monster caused havoc on the base. According to that story, the monster wouldn't quit causing trouble until the chair was destroyed and the experiment stopped. This is how Nichols described the creation of the monster. Duncan let loose a monster from his subconscious, and the transmitter actually portrayed a hairy monster. It was big, hairy, and nasty. It showed up somewhere on the base. It would eat everything it could, and it smashed everything in sight. Now, you're really seeing how these stories acted as inspiration for the TV series. But let's not forget that these men are all dead serious. Nichols wrote that there were other subjects, all young people, and he called them the Montauk Boys. Others have investigated the stories of these men, and some are not convinced they're making it up. One writer said that he's visited the creepy base, and indeed there were underground tunnels and bunkers. He told the Huffington Post, "At first, I didn't believe their stories. These men have not benefited financially. They didn't gain anything from this, and they've endured ridicule as they maintained their story." Thanks to that story, we found another man who claims that he was one of the Montauk Boys, and his name is Stuart Swerdlow. This is something he said about his time at the base and in the chair. Beatings, a lot of torture, electrical shock, burials, near drownings. They'd bring you to the point of death, and then they would save you, and the person doing this would be your rescuer and would say, "I'm the one that saved you, and remember that," and that became your handler. He said the experiments didn't just involve gifted kids, but sometimes kids who were orphans or addicted to drugs would be snatched from the streets. He said a lot more kids could have been involved. In interviews, he has said things such as this: "The aim was to fracture your mind so they could program you. They would change the temperature from very hot to very cold, starve you, then overfeed you, and they loved to hold your head underwater until you nearly drowned. This was effective. It makes a person likely to listen to and obey their rescuer." We went to his Facebook page where he calls himself a gifted hyperspace intuitive, and he says he can also move his consciousness beyond time and space. He claims to be a clairvoyant. He sees into the future, and he can even, in his own mind, see auric fields and personal archetypes, as well as read DNA sequences and mind patterns. He's claimed that during these experiments he once visited Mars, and on another occasion he was sent back to biblical times. We should tell you that Cameron passed away in 2019. Nichols and Bielek are also dead. Swerdlow is alive and well. Many of you, after hearing this, will no doubt question the veracity of these stories. You might ask if clairvoyance or other special psychic abilities exist. We had to look around for some proof that they could exist, but it seems most experts believe anyone who claims to have these abilities likely only has some mental issues, such as schizophrenia. In some forms, this could not be as bad as to make life difficult for that person, and at times they might just have a feeling that they have psychic abilities and just carry on a normal life. To date, there is no peer-reviewed scientific evidence published anywhere that proves that people can have these abilities, but the claims have happened throughout history, and you might even say people who claim to have spoken to a higher power are not too much different from the people we've discussed today. People in groups with a bit of cash behind them have even said they give quite a lot of money to anyone who could prove their psychic abilities when being observed formally. One American magician said he'd lay down $1 million if anyone could do that, and you know what? He's never paid out any cash. We know some secret experiments were conducted, but without evidence, do you believe anything as crazy as these men claim to have taken place, or was it something else? Tell us your theories in the comments. Now go watch evidence that aliens have made contact. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.